Hey everybody, I want to talk to you for just a couple of moments about the single greatest thing that determines your success. And it doesn't really matter to me if you're just thinking about success in life or success in business. I want to tell you the greatest single thing that determines your success in life is your relationships. You know, George Vaillant, who was the Harvard professor of psychiatry, who did the longest running study of mental health in human history, said this one thing: in the end, the only thing that really matters in life are your relationships with other people. I know a lot of us, especially again in Western culture, have been taught and sort of acculturized to believe that the most important thing is you, that you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you got to make it happen. But let me promise you, that's a lie, okay? Because as awesome as you are, you will only be able to carry yourself so far by yourself. And so what am I saying? I'm saying that the greatest single thing that determines your success is your relationships with other people. Now, there was a time in my life, and some of you heard my story before, I lost everything. And it was in that moment that I started to rebuild. And one of the things that I started doing as I started to rebuild was to realize I can't do this by myself. And so I reached out to some people reached out to me. I started forming some very, sort of immature business relationships, meaning, we weren't really mature in business. We weren't really mature in terms of how to operate as partners or as co-workers, but I was desperate, right? And so if you've ever been desperate, you know what it's like to kind of start partnering with somebody who isn't really worthy of a partnership with you, meaning they're not quite at your level, but you don't have a lot of choices and options. And that's exactly where I was. And so I went into this business relationship, and it was kind of in an industry that I knew nothing about. And part of the reason I did that was because I was desperate. And in that process, I ended up getting literally $50,000 in cash taken from me. Went out, now I'm not saying that somebody came into my house and stole $50,000 in cash, but over about a 6-month period of time, $50,000 of my cash money went to this individual, and it never came back. And I'm not talking about an investment. I'm not talking about, money that I freely gave. I'm talking about a situation where I was not that smart, and I ended up giving away $50,000. And I'm telling you what, at that moment in my life, $50,000, that was everything I had. Now, right now, $50,000 is still a lot, but it's not nearly like it was at that point in time. And because I was so vulnerable, I made really bad choices and ended up getting $50,000 behind. Let me tell you what that helped me understand. I learned several things about relationships and business in that moment. The first thing I found is this: we all crave relationships, but the problem with that, if I can be blunt, is that makes us vulnerable. I'm going to say that again. We all crave relationships, but the fact that we crave relationships so deeply, so strongly, makes us really vulnerable. And I'm not just talking about in business. You know what I'm talking about. I'm talking romantically. I'm talking about with partners. I'm talking about friends. Because we want relationships so bad, we are extremely vulnerable, often emotionally, often relationally. But the second thing I discovered in this whole process is people don't really care about you, at least initially, but what they do care about is the value that you bring. So the first thing makes us vulnerable, but this makes us valuable. Now, at first, when I realized people don't actually care about you, Abe, all they care about is the value that you can bring. At first, I was offended by that. I'm like, oh, they should just love me for who I am. And then I realized how unrealistic that is. I mean, my mom loves me for who I am, thanks, Mom. But I can't expect the whole world to love me for who I am. I've got to actually go out there and show people the value that I can bring. Now, I know that you might say, well, I can't believe he's saying that, but it's true. You know what? Nobody owes you anything. I think the problem in our world today, especially in Western culture, is we're teaching people that the world owes us all something. And so we have all kinds of people who are growing up thinking the world owes me something. And now what happens is that when the world's not giving it, because that's not the way the world works, and now these people are angry, they're frustrated, they're resentful, they're spiteful, they look at what other people have, and they think, that's income inequality, and they think this and they think that, not realizing that nobody cares about you, at least initially, but what they do care about is the value that you can bring. Now think about that for a moment. If they care about the value that you can bring, then all you've got to do is unlock your own value. If you unlock your own value, what's going to happen is you're going to be the most attractive person on the planet. But as long as you're sitting there wondering why everybody's not bringing the value to you, you're going to be a lonely person, my friend. And so there's something I learned about business. Again, like I said, the first one is we all crave relationships. That makes us vulnerable. The second thing I found is people don't really care about you. They care about the value. That makes us valuable. But the third, and this one is maybe the most important for some of you, I know it is for me, is that people will take advantage of you if you let them. Okay, so in business, hate to break it to you, but there is a lot of people out there who want to just take advantage of you. Why? Because you're vulnerable and because you're valuable. Now, you are valuable. There's no doubt about that. You are enormously valuable. No one can take that value away. But here's the problem. Sometimes other people see our value before we see it. And then they want to take advantage of us in order to manipulate that value so that they can benefit themselves. And so in that process, what I discovered was I need relationships if I'm going to be successful, but I don't need just any kind of relationship, because I've been hurt through relationships. I've been devastated through relationships. How many of you can identify? If that's you, I want to hear about it in the comments below. Please. I mean, hey, you're not alone. I mean, I'm still pulling knives out of my back, right? You know what I'm talking about. I'd love to hear your story. Please put it in the comments below. One of the things I discovered is that if I need relationships, but I don't just need any kind of relationships, what's my biggest obstacle? And this was hard for me to grasp. My biggest obstacle is myself. In other words, I had learned dysfunctional, immature relationships all my life. That's what had been modeled to me since being a baby. That's what I had experienced when I went to school. That's what I experienced when I got involved in gang activity. That's what I experienced when I got involved in business and in some other communities or little tribes or different groups of friends or whatever. And so I realized that I could spend a lot of time blaming all of those people, right? But that's just kind of like a fool's game. Why not focus on what I can control? And I realized that there was 4 things that I had to stop doing and start doing if I wanted to move from immature relationships to mature, right? And I'm gonna just pause there for a moment. There's a big difference between mature relationships and immature. Immature relationships are all about me. They're all about me, myself, and I. Mature relationships are about serving. They're about giving. They're about elevating and empowering others. There's a big difference between those 2 things. Over here, it's all about me. Over here, it's all about them. Now, here's the problem with this one. The immature one is it feels good in the moment, so long as you're good at manipulating others or taking advantage of them. But ultimately, I can promise you it catches up with you. But over here, on the mature relationship side, where it's about them, what happens is you begin to build what's called mutually interdependent relationships. And that means that you're serving them, they're serving you. And what does that mean? That means everybody wins. Not only does that work in say, a marriage or a friendship or a partnership, but it also works in business. I am so blessed. I'm so grateful. I'm so fortunate to work with business people, business partners who bring to the table skills, tools, assets, and value that I don't have. But the good news is I don't have to have it all. I don't need to have it all. Why? Because these other folks are bringing it to the table. But why are they even at that table? They're at that table because I set a table of service. I set a table of saying, hey, how can I support you? That's a mature table. I think that a lot of us love it when we get called from the kids' table to the adult table. I'll tell you what, the kids' table is me, myself, and I. The kids' table is immature. The adult table is how can I serve you? Not how can I dominate you? Not how can I manipulate you? Not how can I take advantage of you? But how can I serve you? So 4 things you got to stop doing, and then start doing. Here's what number 1. Number 1 is you got to stop comparing and you got to start celebrating. Okay, stop comparing, start celebrating. Now, what does that mean? That means you got to stop comparing where you are at the beginning of your journey and comparing yourself to the middle or the end of someone else's. You know, I think a lot of us, we compare our backstage to someone else's front stage. Do you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like we look at someone else who's so successful, or maybe they're better at something than we are, and we devalue ourselves. And I want to say that's a really horrible strategy, okay? Why? Because then what happens is you're constantly in this comparison with other people. How about you stop comparing and you start celebrating? You'll never move from immature relationships to mature relationships until you stop comparing and you start celebrating. The second thing I discovered, and this might be a surprise for some of you alphas out there who are all like, rah, 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 I'm Mr. Competition, I'm Miss Competition, but you gotta stop competing and you gotta start completing. Okay, so when my business career was younger, I was always looking at my competitors on the playing field. And I was saying, who am I competing with? How can I do better than they're doing? How can I dominate them? And then I started realizing that's a horrible strategy because there's no way I can compete with them. They already have this thing called a market advantage. They have a competitive strategic advantage against me. I'm just entering the market. Who am I? But what I did discover was the magic of completion. What does that mean? Who can I partner and collaborate with whereby they're going to complete me and I'm going to complete them, and then together we're not competing, but we're completing together. We're building something that's going to be bigger than any one of us could build on our own. That's the magic of synergy. That is sustainable business. The third thing that you got to do is you got to stop judging. You got to start affirming. Now, I tell you this, if you are a person who judges others on a regular basis, guess what? You will attract. You're going to attract people who what? Judge. Of course, it just makes sense. Like if I'm just going around all the time pointing my finger at all these other people and judging them, especially if I'm dumb enough to do that online, what's going to happen? I'm going to attract people like that in my life. And if I'm attracting people in my life, they're going to come not only to my life, but also to my business. They're going to probably be a part of my family, my friendships, my close relationships. And that is going to be horrible. Listen, you deserve better, but you also got to give better. So I discovered that if I was going to move from immature relationships to mature, I needed to stop judging and I needed to start affirming. It's not about what's wrong with other people. It's about what's strong with them. It's not about weakness, it's about strength. It's not about tearing down, it's about lifting up. That means, takes me to the fourth thing, you gotta stop grasping and you gotta start giving. Now, I know that this is totally antithetical to the mindset of our culture. You know, the mindset of our culture, again, Western culture, that's where I grew up, that's what I understand the best, is this idea of how can I get what's mine, no matter the cost or the price to you. And that's a bad way to do business. We are not living in the dark ages anymore. I hate to break it to you, but this isn't the Middle Ages, 1200, AD, Europe, okay? This is the new economy. This is the new age. And this is the idea that together we are better. Together we soar, right? Now, here's why am I saying this? I'm saying this because some of you are trying to build your business by yourself. Right? You're like that, my wife is Filipina, and so we have a karaoke machine. I mean, the first thing I bought for her, we've gone through 5 of them now. And sometimes I come home and she's just singing by herself, all by herself. There's this song, all by myself, right? I mean, that's the way some of you are trying to do business, just all by myself. I want to tell you, not only is it lonely, but it's hard to do business by yourself. We're building our team already in over a dozen countries around the world. We're pulling people in from all over the place, growing, and we want you to be a part of that team. So why would you try to build your business alone? It could be with us, it could be with somebody else, but don't try to flourish in business alone. Get connected with people who know where you're going, who've been where you are, and who want to take you to where you want to be so that you don't have to do that all by myself, right? Rather than living that way, get out of that solo mindset, that solo concept, and get into relationships, get into partnership, get into team. Hey, listen, I'd love to hear your comments in the chat below about what you've experienced as you've tried to build business. I shared about a story. Somebody literally robbed me of $50,000, a lot of money at the time, almost devastated mentally, emotionally, financially. How about you? What are your stories? And I'd love to hear them, and I know everybody else would, and we're gonna get around you and cheer you on with support. And hey, if you're interested in being a part of our team, would you go to failuretoflourishing.com? We've got some free stuff for you there. Check it out. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you in our next video.